Hello and welcome to the Intechnica and Compuware APM webcast on how Fourth fixes application performance fast. My name is Nick Dane. I'm a media marketing manager at Compuware. Our presenters today are Berthelsen, CTO at Fourth, and Ian Molyneaux from Intechnica. Christian has been working as CTO at Fourth since 2003 and as such overseeing product roadmap, development and infrastructure of all software at Fourth. Ian has got over 35 years of experience in IT with senior positions at Compuware and Micro Focus. Currently, Ian is head of performance at Intechnica and also wrote a book about application performance. Before we start, a few housekeeping points. During the presentations, all lines will be muted. However, if you would like to ask a question to the presenter, you can do so via the chat facility and we will answer your questions at the end of the presentation. Now I will hand over to Phil Horn, MD at Intechnica, to give a brief introduction of the webinar. Over to you, Phil.
Okay, thank you, Nick, and good morning, everyone. And thank you also to everyone at Compuware for helping us organise this webinar today. So I'm one of the partners at Intechnica. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to us as a business before we get started with the case study today. So we're an IT consultancy specialising in performance throughout the software life cycle. The business was founded out of experiences a number of years ago developing sites for the sale of tickets for events like Glastonbury and Robbie Williams gigs. Obviously, massive sellout events that generated huge spikes of traffic and some fairly considerable performance challenges. Off the back of those experiences, the founders of the business developed a range of professional services, approaches, methodologies for solving performance issues that combines a combination of people, process, and tooling. So we're a professional services organisation. We use best-of-breed tooling across the performance spectrum, so load testing tooling, APM tooling, hence the case study today, monitoring tooling, the full range. And we use those tools as part of the professional services that we deliver to clients. So our aim is to help businesses gain control of the performance of their applications. Commonly, we're helping them adopt a performance by design approach, which effectively shifts performance in the software life cycle, getting performance considered at the design stage, and then throughout the development, and then into live. So a few of our clients listed there. We're non-sector aligned. We work with businesses for whom IT is important, which is obviously a growing number of businesses. So I think this next slide is probably fairly self-evident to everyone on this call. I would be surprised if there's anybody that hasn't been on the wrong end of a performance issue at some point in their career. They are critical to businesses. They do have a big impact. And as is notoriously known, they are very difficult to fix. They're substantially harder to find and fix than functional issues. And that situation is becoming increasingly so through the growing complexity of systems. And invariably, when a performance issue hits, the war rooming situation occurs, which means most of the talented people in an organisation are brought to try and gain control of the situation as fast as possible, which is massively disruptive to businesses, hugely expensive quite often, and basically takes people away from the business that they should be getting on with. So, final slide from me before I hand over to Christian. One of the services that we offer is to help businesses that have a critical performance issue. We call it our find and fix service. It's all about getting into a business and getting to the root cause of an issue as fast as possible. To do that, we use a combination of professional services and an APM tooling. APM helps us identify issues, and then as fast as possible. Without it, you really are sort of going in fairly blind. And then it's the engineers, it's the services that enable us to then provide a recommendation or a fix to that issue. So let me move on now to hand over to Christian, and then subsequently to Ian. Christian, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As mentioned earlier, I'm the CTO at Fourth. Just to give you a little bit of background on Fourth, we have been providing software as a service applications to the hospitality industry for the better part of sort of 13, 14 years. So that's restaurants, bars, hotels, contract caterers, basically anybody who serves food and drink. And we do back office, we do cost control. So we manage your labor costs and we manage your margins, so your food and drink. We've got about, I think we're up to about 1,200 customers at the moment, sort of across 55 countries, and sort of roughly 30 million revenues. So fairly profitable. We operate out of 3 fairly large data centers, probably got about 180, 200 servers. And I sort of get to spend about £4 or £5 million a year on R&D. We do most of that, if not almost all of it, out of the UK. But I think progressively as we go across the globe, we're sort of starting to have to follow the sun. Just to sort of give you a sort of brief insight into what we do. So we manage the 2 main costs of any hospitality business. So that's what you're buying and the people that you employ. So those are 2 variable costs that typically represent 60% of your turnover. So if you can control them on a daily basis, at least you're not hemorrhaging cash. Whether you deliver good service or not, or good food, that's up to you. And we have a full sort of analytics suite around all of that so that you know on a daily basis where you're up to with your purchasing, with your rotas, your scheduling, your labor costs, all your payroll stuff. So we sit between the EPOS, the till, where all the sales takes place, and we sit between the finance system. So it's basically in unit. It's the restaurant manager, it's the hotel manager managing basically their operation on a daily basis. That's what we do. It's all web-based, multi-tenanted, fairly large data centers, terabytes of data, and it's highly transactional. We have a spike on Monday mornings, which is about 15 to 20 times the average. It's not, I guess, the kind of spike you see for a Robbie Williams concert, but it's still fairly massive. So from 9 a.m. on Monday morning till 12 in the morning on Monday mornings, all of our customers basically need to complete and finalize all their data for the week. And that puts a fairly significant transactional pressure on our systems because they run a lot of reporting at the same time as transactional data is happening. So we have the joy of doing reporting on transactional data that is whilst it's being created and being calculated. So you can imagine payroll calculations and all that going on whilst placing orders and doing deliveries and invoice matching. We're pretty much the sort of the leader in the UK in this space. We've got customers, very large customers, very small customers, very boutique customers, and then all of your high street brands you can imagine. And as you can tell, we deal with hotels, we deal with restaurants, we deal with contract caterers, and we deal with quite a few in the US, Middle East, Europe, and a few so far in the Far East. So it's quite a diverse bunch, and our applications need to be able to deal with all those different sort of scenarios. I think the one that is relevant to this discussion today was a situation we had about 2 years ago, where we have one of our largest customers, probably our largest customer at the time. We were in that very small time frame, Monday morning, processing thousands and thousands of transactions for them per hour, whilst they were running report, while all the managers really needed to just get their stuff done and get back out on the shop floor. And almost from one week to another, we suddenly saw the performance of one particular key area around the goods receipting and the sort of purchasing really fall off cliff, which for us is quite unusual. So we've been doing this for, like I said, the better part of 13 years. We live with scale and volume and have been doing multi-tenanted sort of software service cloud environments for many, many years, and see ourselves as pretty clued up on this stuff. We typically always see fairly gradual degradation, and our infrastructure team and performance team can normally sort of manage this, match it, understand it, and deal with it. But we found ourselves in a situation where all of the traditional methods and all the normal standard tools that we had in place weren't giving us that insight. And that was sort of a little bit back to what was mentioned earlier, is there were suddenly quite a lot of moving parts, and more moving parts than what we could actually figure out where the issue was. Or if there were multiple issues, whether it was at the physical layer, whether it was anything to do with the database, operating systems, where it may be. And as I said, we normally know how to do this sort of stuff. So we hadn't done any updates recently. Nothing's changed to the client side. All of this is hosted and run out of our data centers. So really, there's very little the client could do. We looked at their usage patterns. None of that was impacting it. So, you kind of get the same answer back from seeing, yeah, but we haven't changed anything. Okay, I know that, but, we're still seeing a very sudden and very catastrophic sort of slowdown in the performance. And all our traditional tools, profiling, logs, execution plans, all of the traditional things didn't at all give us any sort of insight. So we had multiple avenues we were going down, lots of red herrings, and as you can imagine in a live transactional environment, time is of the essence. And we basically looked around and needed help urgently. And we were recommended to go speak to Intechnica. We went to speak to a number of other sort of consultancies. We had some database consultants as well engaged in all of this. So it was kind of throw the kitchen sink at it territory. And I think the main thing for me was that there was a very immediate response and an ability to jump into our live environment and start diagnosing very, very quickly, whereas a lot of the other people we talked to needed a lot more insight into what was going on and had a fairly significant lead time before any engagements, etc. So I think that for me really was in a moment of both desperation but also great need. We felt really comfortable with the beginning of the engagement we had with Intechnica, and it also led to a very rapid sort of resolution, which Ian will talk to you about just in a second. So I think from my point of view, I think what this highlighted was that even though we have at the time 10, 12 years experience of operating very large multi-tenanted, scaled out cloud-based applications, we still had a major gap on the performance side of things. So I have people who put their hand up when I talk about security, because it's major important to us. So there are people who are dedicated to that. I've got people dedicated to look after our databases. I've got people dedicated to look after environments. I've got people dedicated to look after our architecture. But when asked about performance, there was sort of nobody really that put their hand up that says, yeah, that's the area I own. There's lots of people involved in it, but nobody really owning it, and no consistency of tooling. Now, those are sort of some of the learnings, and we'll get to that. But I think it's probably relevant to hand over to Ian now for him to take us through what it is that they actually did and how they got to the resolution so quickly for us.
Okay, thank you, Christian, and thank you, Phil, for the introduction. Hello, everybody, and thank you for attending the webinar, be it morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you may be in the world. Yes, the problem that Christian's company was experiencing was certainly had been a hard nut to crack, and these are the sort of problems that I guess we specialise in, having a very, very long background in Technica in performance testing, performance analysis, various types of performance consultants. So we're well placed to offer this sort of service to clients, and we can respond very quickly as well, based on our modus operandi. In this particular case, the initial view of the problem seemed to be that at certain times of the month, as Christian's explained, around certain types of functionality, the application server layer basically was driven to the point where it became unavailable. And the application layer had to be effectively rebooted to clear the problem, but the problem would simply keep coming back again. This manifested itself in very high CPU. So you might think a very simple thing to resolve, but wrong. The sort of traditional type of tooling approach, looking at sort of raw infrastructure metrics, wasn't a great deal of help apart from demonstrating the symptom. So we chose to bring in APM tooling, so application performance management, a very current and very effective type of performance analysis tooling. Very much the flavour of the month, particularly with Gartner. If you looked at any of the analysts' reports, it's very much a growth area. But it offers the key ability to dig right down into the real deep inner workings of particularly the application server layer. Now, this is where we felt the problem was. So we brought along the Dynatrace product from Compuware, which we're very familiar with, and we installed it, and we rapidly started to get some insight into what the problem was. So just moving on to the next slide. What I'm going to run through is just a quick series of screenshots from the Dynatrace toolset, just demonstrating the sort of top level and then deep dive approach we followed to trace or triage the problem. This initial screen here simply demonstrates the nodes involved in the deployment. And at a very high level, if Dynatrace detects anything that it considers unusual, problematic, you would get a red indication. You can see here that everything is green, so at a pretty high level, everything appeared fine, but there clearly was a problem. So what we did was we drilled down from here initially to look at, I suppose, more sort of server metrics to start with, just to confirm the problem. And you can see on the to the left here we've got we've got CPU usage in the top left-hand part of the frame, and you can see towards the end of the graph here. It's peaking quite high, and this was as the problem was occurring. The graph below that demonstrates memory, and you can see that the blue area in the top is free memory. The lighter coloured blue is memory that's actually being used by processors. Quite a bit of memory available, so although the CPU is high, there wasn't any indication of memory starvation, which again is something that could lead to this sort of problem. So that eliminated that as a possible cause. Other things presented here, looking at the amount of network utilization, or there were some spikes. There was plenty of bandwidth available, and simple metrics, but important metrics like the amount of free space you may have on the core disks on the infrastructure. So again, no problems there as such. So again, we've gone down one level, and there doesn't appear to be anything apart from simply the fact that CPU is high that's giving us any lead as to what the problem might be. So if we go down a little deeper, we're dropping down now. We're actually looking at a particular process running on the application server tier of the deployment. Now this starts to give us a little more insight, and what we see here is very much the garbage collection behavior, which is a very important thing with .NET or Java. .NET in this case, if there's excessive garbage collection, that can often lead to a very high CPU hits, and there are many reasons for that. If you look at the right-hand side of the screenshot, you'll see that there's a GC core suspension time, and below that CPU usage. Again, Dynatrace will automatically determine if there is anything problematic with garbage collection and will flag that up. Again, we don't see anything, so we still have high CPU, but garbage collection seems to be behaving itself. So we need to dig a little deeper. So on to the next shot. Okay, let's have a look at the APIs. I mean, any application will make use of one or more APIs, and this particular view gives us the contribution of the different types of API that this application was using, and in terms of the amount of CPU hits and the amount of synchronization, the amount of weight, all these things can be problematic. We can clearly see at the top of the list, we see ADO.NET. Well, a very, very large number of .NET applications. This is the tech stack layer that generally communicates with the database. In this particular case, you can see the exec sum column here, 58,015, well, 580,151, pardon me. So it is taking the lion's share of activity during the period where the problem is occurring. So it gives us some clue that perhaps the database is involved in some way. So digging on further, going on to the next slide, we go down a little further again. What we're digging into here is response times. So let's see if there's anything that might give us a clue by if there are any particular parts of the application activity that is slow. And what we're seeing here very much is, again, looking on the left-hand side down the bottom, the contribution of CPU suspension due to garbage collection and other activities that are taking away processing time, weight, where there might be stalled threads, and an I/O, finally the light blue. You can see that I/O is clearly the biggest contributor to certainly to response time. And then if you look to the right, that's even further when we look rather than by tier, by API, where the light blue of I/O is clearly the big contributor. Interestingly, looking at the top here, this is basically a response time distribution, and you can see that of the 6,000 transactions that were recorded during the time of the trace, they were all sitting in the left-hand side, so 0 to 5,000 milliseconds. So if you're familiar with response time distribution, it's good to see everything in the left-hand side of the graph. So there's nothing to indicate that our average response time, you can see there was 148 milliseconds, it's very, very quick. Doesn't seem to be anything problematic there. So we need to keep drilling down. So let's go a little further. We go from here down into the actual classes and methods, and this is a key benefit of using APM. You get right down into the inner workings of the application. So you can see if there's a particular class or methods that are associated with a class that are contributing to a problem. And what we see in this particular view here is that at the top of the list we have a particular method, SNI read sync. So this is a fairly generic method. It's involved with database comms, and we can see that overall 53 seconds of time were consumed by this method. So that's starting to give us a clue that, okay, it is almost certainly database activity that's contributing to the problem. If you look to the right, API terms ADO.NET. So I think we're homing in on the problem. If you look down at the lower part of the view, this is actually tells you which components a particular method is called from. And if you look down a little bit, we'll see SQL data reader and contribution 91%. So we're in the right area now. So it just remains to go down a little further again. And it's not quite a voila moment, but it gives us, I think, a very good indication of, okay, this is a database problem, and it's not, interestingly, a particular data piece of SQL or SQL request taking a long amount of time or using a lot of CPU or memory. It's a lot of the same request that collectively is using a lot of CPU, which gives us our problem. So we were able to in fact, we can go a little bit further. This particular view here is very much from the perspective of the database. So we're looking at sort of significant database call execution. Top of the list we see RP user session get many 6,015 executions. A lot going on here, probably a lot more than you would certainly the application developers were expecting. And below that, you can see which components this particular database call is actually coming from. And you can see 6,015, principally .NET, a little bit of WCF in there, but it's very much tied to the ADO.NET API. And then on the final slide, we'll just drill down a little bit further, and we sort of come back from the database back into the class method view, and this shows us that what we've actually got, it just reinforces that. You can see at the top here that the Dynatrace has a term pure path, which is effectively a whole sort of a call stack for a particular transaction or event, and it doesn't use sampling, which is interesting. One of the benefits is that it captures absolutely every transaction that occurs. So if there is something intermittent or only occurring occasionally, it will pick it up. Because if you are sampling, you can miss the ends of the bell curve. Sampling's fine in production, but when you're digging into a real problem, you really need to capture everything, and that's where Dynatrace certainly shines. And it confirmed, if you look in the lower pane, SNI read sync com, there it is. So every one of these 6,015 sync method invoker calls is also calling SNIReadSync.com, which is effectively the cause of our problem. And it was interesting that after relaying this information back to Christian and his team, as Christian said, there's been no changes, there's been no code drops. It did actually turn out that ultimately it was related to a database driver. And that was, by updating that driver, that resolved the problem. Effectively, the driver problem that was giving SQL Server a problem of how it was using memory, and the indirect effect of that was a very large number of unnecessary calls, each of which used a little piece of CPU, which resulted in a very high CPU hit overall. So quite a subtle problem. And without something like Dynatrace, I think we would probably still be scratching our heads in terms of what's causing this. But it just serves to demonstrate the way that you can go from a very high level and then drill down through the application stack right down to method level. It's also possible, if the source code is available, to actually drill down into line of code. You can actually make that last step as well. But in this case, we didn't have to. But I think it serves to demonstrate the power of APM, and we have a lot of success helping customers like clients like Christian and Fourth, where there are these thorny, difficult to resolve problems that defy sort of traditional methods of resolution. So I hope that's been useful, just to sort of demonstrate the power of APM and how we help Fourth resolve this particular problem. So, results and benefits. So the critical issue was identified and resolved. I think that was the key thing. This was a problem that was plaguing Fourth for quite some time. Obviously, back to business as usual. Yeah. And I think it demonstrated sufficient value that Fourth now have Dynatrace as part of their standard toolset deployed into production, which gives them this increased confidence in problem resolution. It's much quicker to resolve problems. Well, it can be minutes, days, rather than weeks, and then obviously are much less disruptive to business. So, thank you very much. Back over to you, Christian.
Well, I think I'll just echo what you just said, which was, I think, of course, grateful that we've got the issue resolved and that it was fairly easily to resolve. that there wasn't something fundamentally in the architecture or in the database or in the sort of the front end work of what we've done. So I guess that was good. Looking back and reflecting on it, these tools and design methods should have been in place at the build and design phase for sure. They are now become part of our QA quality assurance process. The stress test, performance testing, and then the tooling has shown themselves to be necessary in order for us to maintain the sort of ability to scale and handle, the growth volumes that we're faced with. And I think we can also now say that there's someone who's actually much more dedicated to the art of performance. We've chosen a model where we have an ongoing relationship with Intechnica, but we have now also people trained on using the tooling. So we sort of got a hybrid model, I guess, and we use services as and when we need them, but we have the tooling in place now. So quite a big wake-up call, probably slightly late in the game, but that's how it is when you, I guess, when you build growing businesses. We were very, very happy. The customer naturally was very happy that we could resolve it, and I also think we probably would have had a number of other situations since then if we hadn't had this in place. I don't think we're there yet. I think there's some stuff we want to do to integrate it into our continuous integration and automation, and so there's some more levels of maturity I think we need to go through as a business to really make sure that it's performance by design rather than making sure that it sort of works afterwards. But yeah, that was sort of I guess sort of my conclusion to all of this, and I couldn't envisage just not having this kind of tooling in place at all to grow the business over the next number of years as we are.
Okay, thank you very much, Christian. So this is Phil Horn back again now. I'm going to manage some of the Q&A session that we have. We've got a couple of questions that have come in already. Can I just prompt everyone to, at this point, send their questions in via the question panel? I'm going to start from the original one and then I will ping you to either Christian or Ian for their response. So this question is, we have a lot of variation in our application times. Is there any way to reduce this variability when using web services? Okay, I'm going to throw that one at Ian. Okay.
Phil, I'm very sorry. My headphone was very. Could you repeat the question? I'm very sorry. Vagaries of telephonics. Well, I think so. Yes, most certainly. I think this wherever you have variation in response in application times, I think the key thing is getting visibility of it. I mean, it'll manifest itself, I'm sure, in a number of ways, where maybe end users reporting erratic experience, periodically slow web pages. And I think the key thing here is the fact that with APM tooling, we're capturing everything. We're not sampling. So if this variation is intermittent or transient, then something like Dynatrace will give you insight into when it's happening, and very importantly, why it's happening.
Yeah, I think I could add something to sort of, I think, to this question as well, but in terms of web services, because I guess it's something that we use quite a lot, and it's a double-edged sword. Some of the web services removes the need to produce the actual front-end code because you're just exposing sort of APIs and web services, the double-edged sword there is that can very quickly become incredibly popular, and you suddenly get an enormous amount of traffic coming in through that route. We've seen quite a lot of success in implementing a caching and proxy layer in front of, and a management layer in front of our web service and our APIs. And if anyone's contemplating sort of going big on web service and APIs and stuff, then those sort of tools are pretty essential to have together with your APM tools. I would recommend, yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you, Ian and Christian, for that. So the next one starts with an observation first, which I'll read out. So it is obvious that APM was useful, but it was half of the solution. The clear second half was deep expertise on application .NET and SQL. And then the question goes on to say, is it realistic to imagine that the tool contribution could be levered without that high level of expertise on the software structure side? Should I, Christian, do you want to hand?
I don't think you can have one without the other as such. I think that the tool will tell you where the problem is, or help you tell you where the problem is. If your team doesn't, or if there isn't people knowing how to interpret that and then go and do something about it, then the tool in itself will not do that. There is as with any of these things, it will pinpoint where the problem is and probably get to it a lot quicker than you could do manually yourself. And yes, you need to understand your application stack, or have someone like Intechnica come help understand it and interpret it for you. So I think to begin with, we had a lot of help interpreting the results, and then our team started to be able to connect the dots fairly quickly after that, after the sort of first couple of sessions. So as with any of these sort of tools and performance, you need to be able to do both sides. We know our architecture infrastructure really, really well, but we couldn't get a consistent view of where the problem was. And so it was for naught having all this expertise sitting in-house, because we couldn't pinpoint where the problem was.
Great, thank you, Christian. Okay, I think you've covered that nicely without me needing to bring Ian in on that as well. So on to the next question, and I'll just say if anybody has got any questions, probably got just a couple more minutes. So if you want to ping them over now, and we'll see if we can get through them. Next question. So I'm not entirely sure of the context of this, but I'll see if Ian can have a go. So are we still in incident/problem management, or already on software debugging? Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Phil. Oh, interesting question. I think this puts us right in the zone of DevOps, a very familiar sort of current methodology buzzword, because APM, we found the problem, and we are in the code, we're in the class, we're in the method, so we can feed this information straight back to the development team. I think that's key. That's a very, very powerful capability of APM. So we're in the DevOps loop. We have a problem in production, which we feed straight back to the developers who can then address it, investigate further, make the changes that are required, and then resolve the problem. So it completes that DevOps loop. In this case, it was a database driver, but it could easily have been coding problems, any number of anything related to the architecture of the application. So we're very much in fix mode. I think that's how I'd like to position it, and that's what APM gives you.
Okay, lovely. Okay, so a further question here: will the company, the gaining company, I think that's the company that, will the company become capable of exploiting the tool without consultancy and support? I know my answer to that. Should I give you that, Christian?
Well, absolutely yes, but you have to have the desire and feel the need that performance is a big enough issue for you as a company to nominate someone to be responsible for performance. The minute they are there, this tool, they'll be able to use this tool and work together with the teams very, very easily. We've chosen, because it's our lifeblood, and if we have the smallest bleep, we've chosen to have a person like that, but to extend our reach whenever we need to be able to pick up the phone. That's our choice, but you could become very proficient with these tools very, very quickly, for sure.
Yep, I'll add a little bit to that to say we see the full spectrum there between introducing, probably configuring appropriately an APM solution. We've sold Dynatrace into ASOS, Channel 4, a number of other of our clients, and there's a real mix between how self-sufficient they are now. Some of them entirely self-sufficient, and some of them still very reliant and seeking our services around Dynatrace. So it's a real mix. Depends on your appetite for it. Okay, I think we will just go to one question. If there's any questions, obviously, that you want to follow up with afterwards, I don't think our contact details are on here, which is a bit of an omission, but I will send a message out to everyone at the end with our contact details, so you can send your questions through still. Let me just pick one last one. Ian, you pick one that you would like to go with there. Okay.
So let's take, how do you identify architectural problems? Well, I think again, because you're looking inside the, particularly the application server layer of an application, you can very quickly see if there is anything fundamentally wrong. The thinking, particularly with CI, is that you're doing this sort of analysis as you write software. So you're doing this deep level diagnostic of units of code. So the entry level may be a problem that's hitting production, but the ideal outcome of that is that tools like Dynatrace become part of your CI process. So you're doing this analysis as you write code. So anything fundamentally that may be anything fundamental architecturally related, you pick it up early, you deal with it, you refactor, and those problems are not rolled into production. So I think it all comes back again to the very deep insights that APM gives you, because without that, then you're very hamstrung in terms of identifying problems that hit performance availability that are related to how the application has been architectured. So that would be my response to that question, I think.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Ian. So we need to call it a day there. Thank you very much to everyone for joining us today. Thanks again to Compuware and in particular to Christian for joining us, Christian from Fourth, for joining us on this. Hope everyone found it useful. I will send around some contact details so you can pick up the conversation and ask any more questions. And yeah, thanks again. Goodbye.
Thank you.